All right, so we'll try to get an immediate update on the situation. The reporter just brought up there that there was another shooting reported at 8th and Chestnut. The police did not have any knowledge immediately of that. The governor there saying this is awful, getting very personal and emotional, saying he lost a close friend in this bank shooting. One didn't make it today. Another friend, he says, is in the hospital. Okay, 4 dead. We've been reporting 5. That includes the shooter. 4 dead, 5, including the shooter. The police engaged with the shooter. It is still not clear whether or not it was the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, as you heard from the police there, or if he died in exchange with the police. The first shots fired 8:30 a.m. Call went into the police. They arrived on the scene there within 3 minutes, and it was still an active shooter situation. These efforts, Andy Bashir saying a moment ago, these efforts saved lives. An update on those in critical condition right now. 8 injured, 2 in critical. One of those includes the police officer. 2 police officers were shot in this, and one is currently in surgery. So we hope to get an update on that situation very soon. As far as what we know about that shooter, a connection to the bank, but the police have not been able to determine whether or not that was an active or a former employee. We'll likely get more details shortly. Jack Jupin is joining us now, former SWAT team member. Jack, jump into the conversation here, as the governor just detailed what is another awful situation there in Louisville.
Yeah, here we go again, right? Another horrible active shooter situation. My heart and prayers go out to the families of the victims here, especially, all those who did jump into the line of fire to save their brothers and sisters and other innocent victims. As previous guests had mentioned, this will be a collaborative effort with all state, local, federal law enforcement. The FBI will jump in, and ATF will jump in and assist from the federal side of the house and try and do the best they can to add the services that are needed by the locals right now.
Got it. As we try to learn more about a situation where we don't have a whole lot of details yet on the shooter involved here, obviously this was a huge immediate response from the police on the ground there, and that very well could have saved lives. They arrived there 3 minutes from the time that phone call was placed to police, and shots were still being fired. You just heard from the police at that time of arrival. That makes a big difference.
Absolutely. The response time here was absolutely incredible. And again, as you know, we constantly talk about training, and this is where the training did kick in. The police did exactly what they were supposed to do, and they went to the crisis site. And unfortunately, in this situation, a gunfight ensued. And we have this situation now where we have officers in the hospital. We have, innocent victims that are deceased. And the training, though, definitely saved lives. And as another guest had mentioned, the training in law enforcement is, up to speed in most departments. The civilians also need to be trained on how to handle these matters when they, come across them. And we think it can't happen, in our town or our city. But once again, unfortunately, this is another example of it can happen anywhere, anytime.
Anywhere, anytime. As you say that, we know this is the day after Easter for so many who are off today. Schools off, people vacationing, tourists are out. This happened in a building on East Main Street there in downtown Louisville. This houses the old National Bank, as we know, but it's not far from Louisville Slugger Field, Waterfront Park. A lot of folks out, 8:30 in the morning, Paul. Not a lot of people would have expected, obviously, something so horrific as this to happen, especially at this time and day.
Yeah, it's a shame because you're right. You're hitting right around rush hour when this situation occurs. So there are people out and about. Thankfully, like you said, a lot of people are on vacation. It's spring break week. A lot of people are, taking time away, and a lot of people are off the Monday after Easter, as you mentioned. So yes, it could have been even worse, unfortunately. But again, thankfully, my hat's off to law enforcement. The 3-minute arrival time is absolutely amazing. Their training kicked in, and they handled the situation the way they should. Unfortunately, lives were still lost. And again, my prayers are with the families and law enforcement today.
Jack Jupin joining us there. Jack, if you can stand by with us, I want to bring in Paul Morrow, retired NYPD inspector. Paul, we're still waiting on the name of this shooter. We're still waiting on whether or not this shooter died in exchange with gunfire with the police or whether the shooter took his own life. Why would police wait to release those details if they know them? For example, whether or not we know if this is a current or former employee, it seems like they would be able to confirm that pretty quickly here.
Well, one of the things they're almost certainly dealing with here is the sort of fog of war, for lack of a better term. A situation like this, as you might imagine, is quite chaotic. There were multiple units that responded. You have multiple agencies now on the ground. They're trying to ferret out here a number of things. For instance, this might very well not have been a bank robbery, as I think has been suggested, and so the motivation here isn't clear. If that's the case, you have to do a lot of background checking to find out what exactly you've gotten yourself into here. Does this person have an accomplice? The motivation here is going to heavily charge what it is that they do going forward in terms of the investigation. So they're trying to figure out what they have. I'm sure by now the person obviously is ID'd, but there's a lot of backgrounding that has to be done here before they start letting everybody in on what's going on.
It was really interesting to hear from the police just a moment ago saying how important it is to constantly practice these active shooter situations and be prepared for them to happen anywhere at any time.
Yeah, so, I mean, that is something that police do regularly. These are complicated drills, and police these days, I don't have to tell you, are really pulled in a lot of directions. There's a lot of issues with recruitment and staffing. Police are shorthanded across the country. And when you need to do training, especially at the level of this, an active shooting scenario, you have to pull people off patrol, offline, off their normal duties to make sure that they are all synchronized. And that takes time and it takes money. So, it's not as easy as it used to be. And, I applaud the efforts of these officers. Obviously, we're praying for all of them. But from early indications, it looks like that training, was borne out.
Just going through some of the details here, we're waiting on the condition of this officer. We know 2 officers were shot in the exchanged gunfire with this suspect. And one of those police have been detailed in critical condition in the hospital, one undergoing surgery. We hope to have an update soon. As you heard from the governor, Andy Beshear, just a moment ago, we need to wrap our arms around these families, everyone who is going through this, and just too many shootings like this, just in the last few weeks alone, that we have had to cover and report on all over the country. And the governor obviously personalizing this, saying that he lost someone close to him in this bank shooting today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenon of our society, undeniably. And, look, we have to see before we start worrying about or coming to conclusions about solutions and whether the response was accurate and, whether we're approaching these things the right way, sort of, writ large as a society. Let's see what happened here. Let's see what the details are. We don't know what the motivation was. We don't know what weapons were used, et cetera. So obviously the police know a lot more. They're going to be going through it. And, let's see what they come up with.
5 dead in a bank shooting in Louisville, including the shooter, 8 injured, including 2 police officers, 1 in surgery at this moment. We're going to take a quick break. Paul, thank you very much for joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.